Hey, welcome to JG3 Reviews, or welcome back to JG3 Reviews. My name is James and I review fountain pens and related things. And today I've got a pen that is actually going to make me eat some of my own words. I should have brought some ketchup and barbecue sauce. This isn't going to be fun for me, but it might be fun for you. I have to offer an apology and a mea culpa. And you know, I'm not as bad as like Fonzie, where the words I can't quite come out. But nobody likes to do this. And why I'm doing this on video, I don't know. But here I am. If you've watched my videos before, you've heard me say that there are a couple of things I don't like, okay? And that makes sense. In reviews, you talk about things you like and don't like. And one of the things I don't like is paying a whole bunch of money for a plastic pen. There's just something about it. And I know that there's different kinds of plastic. And I know some people are very proud of their plastic, and so they believe it is worth more. And of course, there are other costs that go into manufacture. Blah 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 blah. Right? I think there's a lot of overblown plastic in the world. Anyway, that's one of my things, and there are a couple of other things, but I have to tell you about which pen we're looking at here before I can go any further. I talk with my hands. If they had me tied up, I would just sit here and stare. That's the way that would work. So you might have already seen it flashed by the camera. This is a Lamy-Safari, and this is a Lamy-Safari, and then there's this fistful of pens that look like Lamy-Safaris. Years ago, I was looking for a pen to get back into fountain pens. I had a few, one very nice fountain pen, but because it was nice, I didn't use it all the time. It was a gift from my wife years and years ago, back in the 90s. And I was just looking for something that wasn't too crazy expensive, something on the cheaper side of things. I didn't really know yet about Chinese pens and some other pens that are quite reasonable. And so I was looking at pen sites and looking for advice and reviews and all those kinds of things, and kept coming up, a great pen to start with is the Lamy-Safari, because a lot of people start with the Lamy-Safari. There's a couple of things that kind of kept me from doing that. One is I kept thinking, is it as good as they say? Because some people, they kind of build the pen up to be something that probably isn't quite impossible for it to quite be. And then there are people who said it was junk, or that they just didn't like it. It wasn't their preference. And so, you kind of go back and forth in reviews until you finally make a decision and bite the bullet. Well, I decided I wasn't going to get it. I instead went with the Kaweco Ice Sport, which I love. One of my favorite pens, absolutely one of my favorite pocket pens ever. And so I felt like my choice was fantastic. And I would, every now and then I would think, but I wonder if that pen was as good as they said. But I kept looking at it, and I was looking at this great big giant obnoxious clip, and I just kept thinking, do I need this great big thing? And when I wear a shirt with a pocket, what in the world? Why? And I know they won awards and all of that kind of stuff, and people just absolutely love it and they've made the big giant one for some of their stores and things. But I look at that clip and even though we'll get to the pen and what I think about it, I could still tell you that today I look at this pen and no. Now, I solved that problem a little bit, but I got in an eBay auction not too long ago the charcoal model with the blacked out clip, and it blends in enough. I don't see it so much, so I don't think about it. But that still could have stood in my way from ever having one of these pens. And of course, there was, the price of the pen, because not that it's an unfair price. I'm not saying that, but there are great pens, as good a pen, great pens at much cheaper, a fraction of the price. So that held me back, and I wasn't convinced I was ever going to like this pen. I was quite convinced I wouldn't. Over at the Pen Habit, it was said one time that somebody had asked him why he didn't review one of the copies of the Lamy-Safari, and I believe his words were, "Why would I want to write with a crappy copy of a crappy pen?" He really doesn't like this pen, and I kind of shared his opinion. And then, not too long ago, I had a little bit of money on a gift card, so it wasn't going to cost me anything. It cost whoever gave me the gift card, it cost them. But it wasn't going to cost me anything, and I'm standing in the store in Kansas City at the Penn store. Great store, by the way. If you're there, drop by there. And I'm looking at it, and I think, you know what? It's for free. Maybe I should give this pen a shot because I have nothing to lose. And so I bought the pen. And now I have something to lose. I think I lose face. I was wrong. I'm sorry. This is a great pen. I actually really, really like the pen. Way more than I ever thought I would. Still don't like the clip. You're going to hear that again probably. But I like the pen. So what I have for you today is, first, an apology. So at least you know you're getting honesty out of this channel when we do reviews. I was wrong. That's honesty. And now I have a problem. So, because now I've already got another one. And I have, and some of these, we'll take a closer look at these in a second, but I want to share with you how do some of these copies stack up to the real thing and what made me change my mind. So let's flip that camera and get this started. Okay, so looking at the pen, this is the Lamy-Safari. A lot of you are already familiar with a lot about the design of this pen. It's made from ABS plastic. You can get it. If you get the aluminum version, obviously, you can get it in metal. That's going to be more expensive, probably about $15, $20 more than the plastic pen, so that's always something to consider. There is that gigantic clip, and you like it or you don't. I guess there's probably not a lot of middle ground. I'm a don't, but I've gotten over that because of what I like about the rest of the pen. This one is just the shiny black. You can get it in all different kinds of colors, both plastic and metal. And then special editions that come out. They have the tourmaline that's out right now. And then you have at the top, you have this it looks like a Phillips screw. It's not. This is just a plastic finial at the top. There is just a plane at the bottom that does say Germany on it. And just a very simply designed pen. Except for the clip, honestly, there's not anything that just gives me heartburn over the rest of the design. It does have an ink window so that you can see as the ink. This one has plenty of ink, but I take that back. You can see through there. I've used more than I thought. I'm almost out. You can see through the window that there is not much ink left in this cartridge. And I do have a converter. It did not come with one, but I do have a converter. And this one is filled still with a cartridge, I think. Watch, we'll open it up and I'll find a converter. So this is the pen uncapped. And a lot of people don't like, again, this sectioned grip. And it's made for kind of a tri-fold grip. If you have a grip like this, then actually it's probably going to fit really well. If you have kind of some of these different ones, maybe not. So know that going in. They do have the Lamy name in the plastic there, and all of this is done very well. This is going to be the difference between this and some of the pens I'll show you in a minute. Yes, you pay more for the Lamy. Yes, it's more than I like to pay when it's not a gift card for a plastic pen. But the quality is there. It is a well-made German pen and all that implies. So there you go. Here is the nib. Mine's it's a little dirty. I've got ink on it. And it is a steel nib. And you can go on YouTube and you can actually look up how Lamy-Safaris are made. And you can actually see at the factory how these are stamped out by machine and inspected. You will actually get some ink. They'll tell you that when you buy the pen. There's probably going to be a little blue ink on the nib when you get it because they do dip test every nib. And that's a difference between this and some of those pens that we'll look at here in a second that come out of China. This nib was tested at the factory. And so that's a little bit of a quality control and quality assurance that you're not going to get from some of the competition or from some of the copies and things like that. Clones, there are some clones out there. I will say, be very careful when you buy a Lamy-Safari that you buy it from a legitimate distributor because there are a lot of copies and clones and you don't want to end up with one of those when this is what you're paying for. And some of those are absolute garbage. And some are good. Okay, we're going to look at a few, but some are terrible. But if you're paying for a Lamy, you want a Lamy. So be careful. In fact, I don't buy this from just generic online retailers that sell everything in the world, because that's where a lot of the copies fly under the radar. I would only buy one of these from an actual pen store with a Lamy distribution. So there you go. And that's just my bit of advice on that. When you take off the barrel, which has, by the way, that window is on both sides. I didn't mention that if you're not familiar. I was right. This is not, I thought it was a cartridge still in there. This has been a converter for long enough for me to use a lot of the ink in it. Then you have the nib that I showed you, plastic feed. You can easily swap these, and this is actually an appeal of not just the Lamy-Safari, but Lamy pens in general, is that a lot of them have share the same nib. So like I have a Lamy Studio, which my wife gave me for Christmas, and I love it. That review is coming. This nib, they could swap. So if you have another Lamy pen and you wanted to swap, this is a fine, for example, and you wanted to swap the medium into this pen from, say, my Studio, you could do that, no problem. And so that is one of the appeals, and you can easily find replacement nibs for this pen. So that would be one of the pluses. Another plus, of course, is you do have this O-ring here, which is not really going to help you because of that ink window. You're certainly not going to be able to eyedropper this pen. It's also not going to help you if this leaks, but it will help you if there was a leak forward of that ring. But I've never had that problem, but it is there just in case, and that's always a nice thing. So that tells us about the barrel, the inside of the pen, the nib, the grip, and all of that. It does post, well, if you put it on right, it does post, no problem whatsoever. I find I don't like to write with it posted because it just, as you can see, it's exaggerated by the camera, but not by much. It makes for a ridiculously long and not really heavy because it's not a heavy pen, but an imbalanced pen. I'm going to blame the weight on the gargantuan clip. Just get one more shot in there. So I would not use the pen posted. So that is the design of the Lamy-Safari. Now, let's look at a couple of these. I'm going to go ahead and get these out, just lay them on there handy. These vary in how much they look like a Safari. And this one is a Yiren, Y-I-R-E-N. And this is a copy. Okay, not all of these are exact copies, but this one is a copy of the Lamy-Safari. And I bought this one really just for this comparison, number one, and number two, curiosity. I heard people talk about it, and I ordered it because I just was a little curious about how similar is it really. And here's what I found. Wow, I found that I am a little clumsy today. The plastic is just not up to the same quality. It's clearly not the same ABS plastic. I don't know what it is, obviously. It's just not quite up to the quality of the Lamy-Safari. But from 10 feet away, good night, people are not going to know that it's not one unless they notice that on one side you're missing the Lamy name. I will give them that itty bitty bit of credit that they did not put the name on and try and pass it off as a genuine Lamy. But the problem is there might be people who think it is, so be careful, buyer beware. There are going to be some things that set you off pretty quickly. One, it doesn't have the Lamy name on it. Two, this groove at the top, this is getting picky, but it's there. This groove at the top will obviously be different from the real thing. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just not as well cut, not as nicely cut, not as deeply cut. I can't imagine staying up at night over that, but there you are. There is that. It's just an identifier, that's all. I don't care. It's just an identifier. The finial, they did not copy the Lamy-Safari's actual Phillips head finial. The bottom of the pen looks nothing like the one from Germany. Doesn't say it is, and it's more crudely made with the injection mark there. And so there's that. Now the clip, they kind of nailed the clip, but really, honestly, how hard was that? And it is put in the same way, and they didn't copy that. But other things, you open it up, and not only is the plastic just feel a little bit cheaper, it's thinner and has a hollow sound. If you tap it, you can just hear that difference. It doesn't snap on in the same way. It's very secure. It's not that. It hangs on, but it just is, you know, it's like the difference between when you close the door on a Toyota Camry and you close the door on a 78 Pinto. There's just a difference and a clunk versus a clack, you know, kind of a thing. It's different. You had to push much harder. I think this ring is made of a harder plastic, and so it just doesn't even feel the same. There are some things that I like about it. This pen at $4 came with a converter, and the whole pen was cheaper than the other converter. So Lamy, come on, converters. The grip is identical. There's no difference there. You will find, like a lot of knockoffs, and I would call this a knockoff, not an homage or anything like that. It doesn't line up. If you tighten it all the way, you'll notice that the ink window, they did cut the groove for the ink window to line up with the window, see? But it's just not machined as carefully so that it stops at the right point. So when you screw it closed, you can over tighten that to where it goes past that. And if you leave it to where the window is perfect, it's on there, but it's going to come loose a little bit too easily. So there is that. And again, grip, no difference. Let's look at the nib. The nib is surprisingly similar. Of course, it doesn't say Lamy on it, nor should it. It doesn't say Yiren either. So who knows what factory this came out of. But I will say this is an extra fine. It writes almost just like the fine from Lamy, and it writes really well. There's a different feel, and I don't know how to explain it entirely without just handing you the pen and letting you compare, but there's a different feel. Neither has just an overly strong feedback, not the absolute smoothest either of them that I've ever had, but there is a better smoothness to the Lamy. But in terms of what ends up on the paper and the writing experience, it's slightly different, but not as much as you would think. It really is not a bad nib for what it is at all. So there is that one. Then we have, let's go to something a little bit more different. I've reviewed this before, so I won't say too much about the Jinhao. You notice that you can see the converter. Let me get that back in focus. You can see the converter through the window. If you don't want to see that, you're going to have to use a cartridge because that's always going to be there. That's kind of a shame. The clip is entirely different. Jinhao is not trying to pretend that this is not a Jinhao. So it has the Jinhao name set into the plastic, which is much better than the Yiren, but still not quite at the Lamy. The snick of the cap is a little bit closer to the Lamy, and just a little bit better quality in those things. The plastic's a bit thicker. They gave it their own clip, and I don't know. I don't like it a whole lot better, maybe a little bit better, but you know, it's a lesser degree of not liking. That's how I'm going to put that. They do put their logo at the top. The top is just a plain matte finial, and the bottom looks a lot like that Yiren, but a little bit better. There's no injection mark there. So there's that. Same triangular grip, converter included, but a totally different style of nib. This is, I think it's a number 5 nib, if memory serves correctly, from Jinhao. And this is actually a good nib that they share across several of their pens. If you have a 992 and you like it, you're going to like this nibs, provided that you like writing with that kind of a grip. It's going to write exactly the same way. So if you have experience with that nib from Jinhao, you know it's a good one. And actually, this is a good pen. I think I paid, if memory serves, less than 3 and possibly less than 2, including shipping from China. And I'm more willing to pay for this one because they aren't trying to pretend it's something that it's not. It's more inspired by than copy of. And this pen I actually really like and I write with from time to time. Let's go with another from Jinhao. Looks a lot alike, except that this one is metal, and I've had this one longer. I've had it for years, and it sits in the drawer. I love the way this pen looks. Out of all these I'm going to show you, Lamy or otherwise, this is probably, to me, the one that I like the looks of the best. I like it. It's fully a metal pen until you get to the grip section. Even the ring in the middle is a chromed ring. It has a similar looking, but not, unfortunately, the same style of nib as a Lamy. And I say unfortunately for this reason. If this would take it, I would buy a Lamy nib and put it on this pen so that it would write better, but it doesn't fit. This is a Jinhao proprietary nib, and it's narrower. It's kind of hard to tell at first. You think, oh, it's just slightly different, but it's more than just a style difference. There is a width difference, and they don't fit on each other's feeds. And so, like I say, that's actually a shame, because I would upgrade the nib to a Lamy nib in a heartbeat and throw the money Lamy's way to do that, because I like everything about this pen except the nib. And that's why I've never reviewed this pen on this channel, because it would be a waste of your time and mine. I don't like the nib on this pen. It is as scratchy as a chicken foot. In fact, I think I'd rather write with a chicken foot than write with that pen. It's a shame, because I think the pen actually looks kind of good. Let me get those put away. So let's see where we are. Last one. So I was looking online one day, and I saw that Wing Sung also sells a similarly styled pen. I had wanted the special edition after I discovered that I actually liked the pen. The special edition brown, I think they call it maroon, but it was a brown pen from Lamy, but they were a little higher than I wanted to pay, and then they were all gone. And so by the time I hem-hawed around, there was no luck. And so I saw this and I thought, you know, I'm going to get that. I'm curious. I knew I was going to do this review. I knew I was going to have to apologize for what I'd said before about Lamy-Safaris. Now let me get that, and I'm curious. I'll compare that to the pen, and I'll have the brown, right? Well, as you can see, maybe not quite right. I don't know what's going on with this pen. It was advertised by the seller as a Wing Sung pen, but it has a bit of a split personality. When I got it, it says Yongsheng. And so I don't know what company that is or anything about them. This is metal, but they are not even painted in the same color. If the whole pen was this color or this color, I would like it this color preferably. But it's just a very dissatisfying mess of two different shades. And it's really a shame, because there are some things that I like about this pen. One, I like that it's metal. The finial at the bottom, I really don't like. You can see it doesn't have the craftsmanship of a Lamy, or even of the Jinhao, or maybe not even of the Yiren. But it has a little plastic thing glued at the bottom. Not really crazy about that. Everything else right here, except for the wrong name etched in, if it said Wing Sung, I'd feel better about it, I would like, except for the two shades. The clip is actually the same as the others. It's a good strong clip. It's still just as big and obnoxious, but hey, they nailed that part. It has a Wing Sung logo at the top. They're sure not trying to be Lamy, are they? They just don't know who they are trying to be. But it has a Wing Sung logo at the top. You're probably familiar with that if you know Wing Sung. Then you open up the pen, and it has a smoke-colored, transparent plastic feed. And I like that. That doesn't bother me at all. That's fine. And you see that in some of these pens. You'll notice that the ring comes off with the opposite part. On the Lamy, it stays with the grip section. Here it goes with the barrel, which has a plastic liner inside the metal barrel. So there's that, and it's just, I will say, whoop, whoop, and it's gone. I can't grab that looking through the camera. This plastic, really not anything to write home about. It does come with a converter, speech withheld. It's kind of a cheapy converter. Wing Sung converters are usually pretty good. This one is a little bit, you know, you can see how loose that is. Not as good as some that I've gotten from them. And so I'm thinking, as I'm looking at this, is it Yongsheng? Is it Wing Sung? Is it a copy of a copy? Did Yongsheng copy some of Wing Sung? Or, this is what I suspect, is this a parts bin special with a little bit of this and a little bit of that? And I think that's what I've got. So I think from here on, it's Wing Sung. And the cap is Wing Sung, but maybe barrel and converter not. So the nib is a Wing Sung logoed nib. This is an extra fine, and it writes in what I would consider an extra fine. And it writes fine. It's good. It's not a problem. It has a smooth feed at the back, as you can see. And the working parts of the pen are okay. I don't have any problem with any of that. It writes okay. But it is a little bit of a hot mess when you start looking at who made what and what parts were supplied by whom and everything else. So nobody's going to be fooled by this pen, and that's okay. I didn't hardly pay a thing for it. Certainly less than the price of a converter and less than the price of some boxes of ink cartridges. So that was pretty cheap, so not much of an investment there. So that's the difference between the Lamy and these copies. So if your question was, can you get a pen that's not a Lamy that's as good as the Lamy? Here's what I'm going to tell you. You'll get some pens like that green Jinhao and even almost the Yiren that write as well, but looking in terms of the parts and the quality and the craftsmanship, nah. If that's what you want, you better buy the Lamy-Safari, and it'll be worth it. So let's do a quick writing test and wrap this up. Okay. Let's look at and see how this pen actually writes. As I said, you know, that triangular grip is for some people going to be the deal breaker. I like it. That's not a problem. This one is the real thing, okay? This is the Lamy-Safari. And this is a fine nib. And I would say it's exactly how it writes for a German fine. And this ink is the Lamy ink. It's a Lamy blue. Hey, some people don't like this ink. I actually do. It's not the strongest blue, but I think it's a good everyday blue. I use this pen mostly in taking notes for a class where I'm writing quickly, and that's where I found that I really like this pen. I like how it writes because I started with it because this grip is good when you're writing for a long period of time if you have the kind of grip that I have, and so it was helpful that way. I'm going to be quiet and let you hear this. And as you can hear, there's really just not a lot of noise. There's a little bit, just a minute bit of feedback. It's not even up to a pencil type feedback. It's fairly smooth, and I've come to appreciate their nibs, and I came to appreciate them first in that studio, and then in this pen. It's kind of a stiff nib. You don't get a whole lot of variation. It writes with about that much wetness. So I think that's kind of in the sweet spot to me. A lot of my pens fall in that range. And so a good pen. I'm not going to write more because I want to get to some of these others, but I have really come to appreciate the way that it writes. Let me go to one that's different. This is, again, the Wing Sung is what it's supposed to be. The barrel says Yongcheng, and I do believe that as far as the nib and everything goes, this is a Wing Sung. And I'm not going to bother with the model name. You can look that up. I'll include it in the description because really, this is not even the pen I'm reviewing. This is an extra fine, and it definitely is. And I believe the ink that I have in this one is a Noodler's Midnight Blue. Familiar ink on this channel. I like that a lot. Now I'd say one thing I like about this was a good nib for writing on paper where the Lamy and others might bleed through a little bit or ghost a bit. I have a planner that I use that's not, you have to write with a fairly dry pen, and that's the way this one is. So, wow, 1, 2, 2. Wow, I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's all I'm doing of that. So this one has a lot more feedback, and it's an extra fine, and I think it's just fairly typical for an extra fine pen. Not bad at all. Very pencil-like. And so even though, man, it loses big time on all these the mess of mixed parts and everything, this actually is a good writing pen, and it's a good nib. It's a good extra fine nib if you like an extra fine nib. So there is that. Let's see here. I am not writing with that black one. It's just horrible. Let's do the Jinhao. The Jinhao, and this is a 599A. I think that metal one that's terrible was just a 599. And this pen I actually recommend because it's not just a copy or clone. They did some things differently. And the nib on this one is, let's see here, that's a fine. I couldn't remember. That's a fine. It writes closer to a fine to medium to me. I'm gonna put fine to medium. It's good, and it writes well. Oh, I can't. And probably with a little bit more wetness, yeah, than the well, fairly close. That's a different shade of blue slightly, but a little bit wetter. This is just a good nib. Okay, I like this pen, and so that's the Jinhao 599A. And that pen, I would actually recommend. It's a great pen if you want one that you don't have to worry about because of its value. A couple of bucks is all you're going to invest in that pen. And then there is this one, which is a copy. Okay, this one is an inspired by, heavily inspired by, but different. This one is a copy. This is again the Yiren, I guess is how you say it. I realize that every time I say that, it sounds like I'm saying something else, but we're not going to go there. And I will put the model number. This one, I can't remember the model number. I'll put it in the description when I post the video. And this is also a fine nib. No, I'm wrong. This is an extra fine nib, but it writes more like a fine. That's why I thought that's what it was. And so it too is just a fairly good writer for a copy. It's drier. It has a little bit more feedback, but not a lot. So I kind of like writing with this pen, even though, you know, I'm not a fan of something that is this close a copy of something else. In terms of just the quality of the pen itself, it's lower quality than the Lamy in terms of its build and plastic, but it's actually a fairly good writing pen, and so I like it for that reason. And I wouldn't recommend it just because I feel like that's too close a copy, like I would the Jinhao. But there it is. So that kind of gives you a little bit of the difference in the writing. They all write, okay? They all write. Of these pens, the real thing is the one I would suggest you buy, no doubt about it. And man, was I wrong. I really like that pen. I really like both those pens. If I was looking for an alternative that still had that grip, but maybe you want a more traditional nib, maybe you just don't have the will to invest. Maybe you don't have a gift card. I paid almost nothing. I didn't pay much for this, and I did pay nothing for that. Then I would suggest the Jinhao. It's actually a really good pen, and you'll enjoy writing with it. But there you go. The Lamy-Safari, better than I thought it would be. And here I am now, a convert. Well, God bless you. Have a good day. Share the video with a Lamy hater, and maybe they'll come around. Who knows? Like and subscribe, and God bless you, and have a good week.